I'm Andrew Hutcheson.
Charles Frank. I'm a director and co-founder of Voyager. Andrew's
Oh yeah, I'm our
VP.
VP and also co-founder. Yeah.
Cool. Well, so we are talking about the subject of how to make money in this industry. Particularly, we're going to be talking about commercials and kind of balancing commercial work with passion work, and because there's only a few of us here, we'd love for this to be like super interactive. And so if anyone has any questions or things as we go, we don't want to just be lecturing. We'd love to answer anything, ask anything. We're very much an open book in that way.
Yeah, please throw things in the chat and we can kind of tailor it as we go. As Charles said, this is going to really come from our experience of running our own production company and kind of turning what started as a like making videos together in our apartments into the company today. But it's pretty applicable whether you're freelancing, however you're trying to go about making your career in the business. Same principles I think that have allowed us to be successful do apply. Really, Voyager started off as a branded content production company, but before that, it started off just as a way for us to pay for our short films so that we didn't have to go to our friends and family on Kickstarters or drain our savings or take out another credit card in order to be able to try and make the films we wanted to make. We had the idea that we could sustainably fund those films through doing work for clients. And it really wasn't much of a bigger dream than that. That snowballed over the last 6 years. We've been a business to the company today, which is a full-fledged production company. We do feature films, documentaries, broadcast commercials, branded content, campaigns, creative development with a staff and roster of directors. But this really just started from the question of how do we get paid to make films for a living?
Yeah. It's a good summary. Basically, for like the key points that we're going to try to get through, we'll start by talking a little bit about just how to get work. I remember just when we were starting, it seemed like an impossible uphill battle, a lot of cold outreach, and it was hard to fathom how we were going to get work. So we'll talk a little bit about how we did it. And then we'll kind of go into balancing that work that sort of pays the bills with the work that's really meaningful and kind of is creatively fulfilling. We'll touch on some lessons we learned along the way. And if we have time, we'll talk a little bit about sustainability, which is a big theme for us. Just as we've continued growing, we've always wanted to be conscious of how we grow and how we can continue making this work and not burning out along the way, which I think is applicable at any stage that you're at in your career. So yeah, I guess we can start. We have actually a question. What advice would you give to your younger self? Ooh.
Oh, man.
That is a good question.
I'll start with one. I think early on when Charles and I started working together, we had worked on some films in the past in different roles on each other's projects. And around about the time that we were starting the company, we had to make some big decisions. Some of them were like, oh, were we going to live together or going to do this? And we made a key choice that I think has been a part of our success, which was to prioritize the fact that we have a business relationship first. We're very good friends, love each other dearly, but we are first and foremost business partners working at this company. And I think when you can confuse personal relationships and professional relationships, or you're working with friends or family or loved ones, it can be really hard to have the separation that you need in order to actually do your jobs well and be accountable to one another. And keeping those priorities in mind, I think is, it's been a key part of our success.
That's a good one. It's hard. I feel like I'm constantly learning things as we go. But if I were to one key thing, I do remember a very big transitional point for me, especially as a director, but I think it can apply to other things, is that early on, I had a tendency to want every project I worked on to be the most important thing that I did. And it was a very um, suffocating idea, maybe in some ways, that, you know, every project I took on, I put all of myself into it. I would see it as an opportunity to make my next big film. This is going to be the one that elevates my career. And as a result, I think that I often wasn't very considerate of the way that that affected other people that I was working with. It wasn't very it wasn't a very good way to be when I was being hired for a job and I was trying to sort of force it to be my own creative endeavor. It wasn't very considerate of the fact that I was being hired, and ultimately it wasn't mine to hold on to and control fully. And so I think if I were to look back, I would try to tell my younger self that you need to find the place to inject yourself and your creative energy that's effective, that's just the right amount, but also with the perspective that it's ultimately not yours to fully control, and you need to sort of let go and be willing to let go when it's the right time to. So my long-winded way of saying to let go a little bit and realize the bigger picture.
Yeah, that's a really good one. I'm going to piggyback off that with one that came into my head as you were saying it, which is that, you know, you talked about letting go from having to make everything the perfect thing and make everything your passion project. I think when we were starting out, especially in like the years leading up to starting the company and in the very beginning, it was like a badge of honor as to who stayed the latest working at the office and who like worked the most this weekend, or you know, who had the biggest, you know, grind on something. And we both faced periods of burnout and overwhelm in our careers doing this. And yeah, I would just go back and tell my younger self to maybe try and have a little bit of a healthier work-life balance, and that the email that I sent at 10 p.m. wasn't going to really push the needle on my career. Neither was giving up my weekend to work on something. Sometimes work requires that stuff, but it doesn't all the time. But it can be tempting to feel like you have to always be on. That's a bad idea.
Right. But it's not to say that, especially in the early days, there are times where a sprint is necessary, and there's times when you have to pull back. And, you know, just getting into a little bit of one of the areas we wanted to talk about is just, you know, attracting work involves making good work. And that is such a vague thing. But there's a few avenues that we discovered and explored when we really didn't have a lot of resources and we're trying to just, you know, make something of nothing. We found some places where we could experiment and make some work that eventually built our reel to a point where then we could attract work. And there's that expression, you know, you only get the work that you have. So the question of like, how do you have the work is kind of, it seems like a catch-22. But there's basically, I don't know, 3 or 4 areas that we discovered. I don't know if you want to talk about those.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough thing. You do have to just get started making it. You will only get hired for what you have on your portfolio or what someone sees in that. One of the most tried and true ways, if you have a short film, that's great. Cut a trailer for your short film. It's going to be a lot easier to get somebody to watch your work if they're watching something that's a minute long, 30 seconds long, a minute and a half long, than it is watching a 5, 10, 20-minute film outside of a film festival or screening setting. You can also, if there's a cause that you care about or an organization that's you're really passionate about, a nonprofit, making a PSA, like a public service announcement is a really great way to get some experience working for a client. They're often, budgets are very limited or non-existent, but it's a great way to, put outward facing on your portfolio that you've done work for somebody, that you've come up with an idea that helps communicate something more than just what story you want to tell, but actually, achieves a goal or a mission. And then there's Spec Work. Spec Work's the foundation of, I think, a lot of directors and filmmakers getting started in the commercial world, which is what we operate in. And really, that's where you make a commercial that the client is not paying for. You just say, hey, I've got a great idea for a Spotify ad. I'm going to go out with my friends and we're going to make this thing. I'm going to slap a Spotify logo on the end of it and put it on my website. We did that constantly in our early days. And then we would show that work to clients. Once you built enough of that, people would start to, they could see what you could do. You got 2 or 3 things on your portfolio. But this stuff can be hard because a lot of this is self-funding, and you're waiting for the idea that maybe that will get somebody's attention and they will hire you to do a job. In the meantime, there's this really wonderful middle ground. And we definitely subsisted on this in like the year or 2 when we were figuring out what we were doing. And that's online video contests. You've probably heard of some of these, like the Doritos Super Bowl contest. There's a lot of them. Charles's first really big break as a director was one of these.
Yeah, there's the site called Tongle, and there's a few others. The Smalls,
MoFilm is one of them.
There was another one.
Studio Now. If you Google online video contest, you'll find a bunch of these in the first couple pages of Google.
Yeah. And the cool thing about it is like, the budgets are very limited, but what it does provide is they provide a brief, and it's in like a multiple phase where you have a brief that they give you. It's like, hey, we're this company, we're looking for a 60-second spot that kind of covers these things. We want to hear your pitches on it. And so you go through the exercise of making a treatment for it, sometimes we did this a lot. We'd make a pitch video where we'd sort of describe our approach to the project and how we do it. And then they, from everyone, it's an open call, anyone can submit. And from that, they select people to advance to the next stage. And you basically keep advancing until they select one commercial at the end that gets a production budget and makes the spot that they end up using. And in our case, this was how Andrew and I first started collaborating. Andrew, I was feeling very lost, and Andrew said, there's a site. Do you have an idea for this Hasbro commercial? And we came up with something and pitched it, and we won. And then that commercial ended up airing like on their broadcast, on their holiday season on national TV. And that ended up being a really big kind of starting point for us, even though, I'd say since then my style has changed a lot from what we made at the time. It was a wonderful exercise to go through it and to practice our skills. And we lost a lot too along the way. But the benefit was, even the ones that we lost, depending on where we got in the process, we could use the pieces that we didn't win as spec pieces. Like there was something we did for Spotify that we didn't win, but we made like a little spec piece for it, and we were able to use that as like a spec Spotify thing for years.
It's a great avenue. We would always give ourselves the rule that we're not going to spend more than $100 making these things when we were pitching them. And then of course, if you get the production budget, you share it with the people that you're collaborating with. But this can be a great way to just gain experience, get work on your portfolio, and potentially make some actually decent money out of doing so. But let's say, you've gotten to the point where you've done a couple of things. You have really 3 is kind of a magic number in this business. It shows that it's not a fluke, that you can repeat success. But now what do you do? With this work, you need to get it seen where people look for work, for people that they're going to hire. And that can be kind of a tough thing sometimes to figure out. But on our end, we would reach out to people that were making work that we really liked, or ask them, where do you go to look for new filmmakers? And all this stuff. And we kind of boiled it down to a couple different places. First and foremost, obviously, film festivals. Getting your work played at festivals is huge. A great way to draw attention to yourself as an artist. The one that's probably moved the needle in our career the most have been Vimeo staff picks. There are a lot of good articles out there now on people who have multiple Vimeo staff picks, have talked about, how do you get them? It can be a little bit of an alchemy at times, but study that. That's a huge thing. We got our sales reps that do most of this sales work to bring in business for us as a company because of the staff picks that we got on Vimeo.
And that wasn't for commercial work necessarily. That was just passion work, short films. And now some of the branded films that we've made ended up getting staff picks, but in the beginning it was solely the personal work. And I've heard multiple times from creative directors at agencies and clients, they look at Vimeo staff picks. They look through to find new filmmakers and see interesting perspectives. So there's definitely it's a very valid avenue for attracting work.
Yeah, that's a great one, and hand in hand with that, and sometimes getting written up on these, like there are some film editorial websites, oftentimes getting written up on them can help you nab a staff pick. The festival, the staff pick, the editorials, they all kind of play into one another. But some of them off the top of our head are Boom, Short of the Week, Director's Notes, Director's Library, Nowness, if you're doing documentaries, especially like the New Yorker program stuff, Octox, the New York Times. These are great places to pitch your work to. It's like, hey, I made this film. Here's a little bit about it, why it's interesting, why it would be good for your audience. Some of them have submission fees to submit to, a lot of them don't. But those are great ways of getting more eyeballs on your work and showing up in the places where people who are looking to hire, new emerging filmmakers and production companies would be looking. But once you catch somebody's eye and okay, like you have some work and it's all well and good, just being really talented is not going to get you terribly far, because at a certain point, the old saying of talent being as common as table salt is totally true. Everybody making work at the level we are is really great at making films, but being great to work with, I think, is the far rarer trait. I know this is something, Charles, you prioritize a lot in the collaborators that you work with.
Yeah, I definitely think I think it kind of goes hand in hand with what I was thinking about earlier, is that I think that early in my career, I wasn't always the best to work with. And it's something I'm not super happy about when I look back on that part of my career. And I think it was because I was very much prioritizing my vision, and I was trying to make everything about what I wanted it to be. And there came a time when I realized that the thing that lasts and the relationships that last are the ones in which the process was meaningful and fun and respectful. And I think that goes on all levels. It goes with the crew that you choose to hire, the way that you treat the crew that you choose to hire. And then, when I'm working for an agency or a client, the way that I interact with them, the way that I'm understanding of their perspective, or try to be understanding of their perspective, that goes a long way, not just in making the process for everyone more enjoyable, but like when those people come to think about who they want to hire, I think those are the things that people remember more than even the end result, especially in the commercial realm. I just feel a lot of these clients and agencies are making a lot of stuff throughout the year, and they may not be super hung up on the end result. I think of course it's important and we can't just, glaze over that. But what really lasts is the way that the project felt in the process of making it. And so, yeah, just being considerate and nice and thoughtful, and people remember that, and it makes you more desirable to work with on all levels.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, you want to work with your friends. You want to work with people that you like, that you enjoy spending time with. Like, we prioritize that way more. If two jobs are on the table and one of them's like maybe the coolest thing we've ever heard of, but the other one it would be fun to do, but it's with somebody that we love working with, we're going to take that one over the other one every single time. It's just, it's the ends never really justify the means, or they shouldn't.
And I think that feeds in just to an idea generally, like we were talking earlier about just sustainability. I think part of making this career sustainable is enjoying the projects and enjoying the people that you work with, because that's part of what's so taxing about it. It can be so taxing about it is taking on projects that, I mean, honestly, there's been times where we've worked with people that are really difficult to work with, and it's very taxing, to the point where it's like not always the most sustainable way to make things. It just will burn you out. And so I think that's an important part of sustainability too.
Yeah, and when we we come back to that word a lot, just sustainability, and then I think more than, it's got a lot of definitions, how it really relates to us and we see it, is the idea that like, you're going to be doing this 10 years from now, you're going to be doing this 20 years from now. Like, I would like my work at Voyager together to be my last job that I have, and being, a filmmaker being my last career. In order to do that, this needs to be worth it. And like we said earlier, like, the grind is, you're going to burn yourself out working for people that you don't enjoy working for, because you think that it's either worth it for the kind of output you're making for the work. It's not. I promise you. That's not what you're going to look back on and say, oh man, I'm really glad I won this award. It was hell, but I won this award. When you're making your own films, every now and then, sure, yes, you have to put your blood, sweat, and tears into it, but that's not a sustainable or a repeat way of doing something. It has to be an exception, not the rule.
Totally.
One thing that's just as key, and if we're talking in the subject, how do you get work, and it's unavoidable, and I know a lot of people out there like it, I hate it, and that is like networking and cold outreach. It's maybe not a great thing that I'm our executive producer and I don't like sales and networking, but I don't. And I've had to train myself to do it over the years. And it really is, it just comes down to a numbers game. I mean, this gets thrown about all the time, but it's so true. I have a system where every couple of days, I have to send so many emails to either past contacts, just checking in and seeing what they're up to and sharing what we're working on, or doing cold outreach to new prospects. And I can't take it personally, if 3 out of 10 of them get back to me, or if it's 1 out of 10 or none of the 10. I think that's getting into a discipline and a habit. When we were starting the business, we would set like an hour or two. We're like, okay, all we're doing is sales right now. We'd all sit across from each other at this big table and we would just send emails to people. But it took that kind of discipline. It took, and you kind of make it into a game and you make it fun, and you don't just do it willy-nilly. I mean, it does require a little bit of, not a little bit, a lot of thoughtful outreach. I think, that if you can write 100 emails in a day, you're probably going to be better off writing 10 really good ones. This is something that stands out, a lot.
Yeah, I was gonna say, one thing I've definitely learned just about outreach, both in the act of doing outreach and also receiving emails, is learning a little bit about what tends to make people want to reply. And this isn't a general rule; it's not always true, but generally speaking, I think there's maybe it's something I was never taught, and had to learn just from people not responding or whatever, which is just that, like, really simple things like, just keeping your emails really short, really concise, to the point, having a clear ask in what your email is, and also, if you're reaching out to someone, not to let them feel as though it's a template. And I think that requires some research and that requires some thoughtfulness to look into the work that they've done or things that they've worked on or what some of their interests are, and show a genuine interest in what they do and explain why you're connecting with them. And of course, keeping it short is really important. So not to linger on this too long, but I would say if you can make something personable, honest, short, with a clear ask, it's just a huge advantage. Very few people do that, and it took us a lot of trial and error to discover that that's kind of what tends to work. But again, it's not always true, but it's a helpful, very simple thing I think we've discovered. Am I forgetting anything in that?
Well, I mean, just, I don't think you forgot anything, but something that I just thought of now is, I think it's really tempting to, a lot of times, why do you do cold outreach? Why do you email people? Because you want something from them. I can tell immediately when I'm reading somebody's email, it's like, are they just thinking about themselves when they're writing this as to what do they want from me? Or am I going to derive any value out of this outreach, really? And that could be just as simple as, someone having some nice things to say and, like, hey, I'd like to, ask you some questions about how you did this thing, not coming just outright and saying like, hey, here's my stuff, hire me for this job. Sometimes that works if your work's really amazing and your email is very personable, but a lot of times if you can, try and put yourself in the headspace of, well, why would this person want to get back to me? Why would they want to hire me for this job? Why would they want to do this? The answer can't always just be because you're the shit. There's got to be something else there. I think the more that you can think about writing the type of emails you would want to receive, the better off you'll be, as a good rule of thumb.
Yeah.
And this all feeds into, where you're networking, and what that really means. And I think that networking isn't just putting business cards in palms. I actually don't know the last time I gave out a business card, if I still have any, but it's about just meeting people and making relationships. I think that the people that you reach out to whose work you admire is incredibly valuable. We had a sales strategy in the beginning where we called it the taste book, and we would just make like a running Google Doc of all the coolest commercials or branded docs or things that we'd seen out there. We'd research who are the people that made them, and we would try and get to know those people, just as like, hey, we thought you made this thing really cool and we want to make work like this. Could we buy you a cup of coffee? Could we ask you a couple questions? You give us a couple minutes of your time to talk. Some of our best relationships to this day, both as collaborators and clients, came from that. And you have great networks already at your disposal. If you went to a college, you probably have an alumni network. I know NFFTY's alumni network is one of the Facebook groups that I'm always posting in when I'm trying to hire people for stuff. There's the video consortium if you're into documentary or nonfiction work. There are probably Discord servers or Facebook groups for, again, if you're a college alumni, for your, like my high school has an alumni Facebook group that I'll post in. There are probably message boards for your area. One of the best, actually, where Charles and I met, one of the best ones was in the New England area. There's something called newenglandfilm.com. This exists in every region. And you can find these places through the Film Commission. So your state and maybe your city, depending on where you are, have a state film commission. This is paid for by the National Endowment for the Arts. And this organization's job, their resources are free. Their job is to promote film and television production in that state or in that city. They often have crew directories. They almost always have job boards. And they have people who will give you the time of day if you're reaching out saying, hey, I'm so-and-so and I'm trying to make it in this area, especially if you're in a smaller market. I can't stress enough what a great avenue that is for meeting people, for getting job opportunities. When I was living in Boston, I was on newenglandfilm.com all the time, looking for anything, PA work, you name it, pick up a truck, drop it off, to shooting things, renting out equipment. That's a really great avenue.
And that also just made me think, when I live in Portland, Oregon now, but when I was living in New York, there were many, many times where I'd find, and this is related to what we were saying, but I'd find directors that I wanted to connect with them, not so much from a sales perspective, but just from like a learning perspective and wanting to hear about how something happened and how something got made. And I would see something online I really loved, and I was shocked by the amount of times when I reached out to a director and talked about what I loved about their film and asked if, you know, I could buy them a coffee or whatever. Like 9 times out of 10, people responded and were down to just meet up. People that I thought would never even respond to me because they seemed too big, you know. But I think that other directors, for the most part, are wanting to support other people and lift other directors up and share what they learn. And that was a big help for me. And there have been times now, and this wasn't my intention, but there have been times where directors have passed jobs along or suggested me for work, or even just suggested Voyager as a company to service a job or something like that, just because of these types of, you know, learning experiences. And there's been times I've just learned things. I mean, a lot of the advice I'm sharing are things that I've learned from other directors that have been doing it longer than me, that passed it on to me, and I'm just sharing kind of what they said to me. So those have been really valuable things. And I know we've talked about, Andrew, just like, and that's true for any position on a film, like reaching out to other producers and other EPs,
Absolutely.
which I know is something you do.
Yeah, I mean, I think you know, networking, maybe I gave it too much of a narrow description there. Like, it really is just about, you know, building relationships. At the end of the day, especially if you're a producer, your network is your net worth. Like, that is what your contacts, who are the people that you know, who can you come to answer a question or to, you know, help you do something. That really defines a lot of how, you know, how well you can do your job. And I think we're all in this career for many different reasons, but in there somewhere is a love for the art of filmmaking and storytelling. And as Charles said, you know, like the people out there who are making the films or telling the stories or creating the work that you wish you were doing or that you look up to, most times they're like really nice, good people who want to pay it forward. And it definitely behooves you to reach out with a clear, ask, well communicated email. But you know, I mean, I've definitely sent emails that, in hindsight, looking at them, I'm like, well, of course they weren't going to respond to that. But you know, I think that's yeah, that's a big part of it. So jumping along here, because we could talk about email etiquette for an hour. I could. But I think, you know, you get into the point where, okay, you made some stuff that you're proud of. You're starting to, you know, talk to people, get your name out there. A part of this, you know, how do you do this sustainably, is how do you find balance in this work? How do you make sure that you are both making work you're proud of and not going broke doing it? Like we said, we started Voyager because the idea of just drain the savings or like ask our friends and family for money on Kickstarter to make a film wasn't gonna make us enough films, let alone pay our bills along the way. And your passion film work, like your script, your personal project, candidly is probably not going to make you a lot of money. I hire all the time producers for us on jobs who won Sundance, you know, who've like won numerous big festivals or have their movies on all the major streaming platforms, movies in theaters, and they need to do commercial work to you know, pay their bills. Even if you make it into the 0.001% of people that are making it full time in narrative or documentary or television or you know, original filmmaking, that can be years down the line. And as you're getting there, there's a, you know, again, there's a reason why Charles and I, in addition to all the films we make, are primarily a commercial production company. And that's kind of from this Robin Hood mentality that's not very complicated, but I'll let Charles explain it.
Yeah, well, backing up just a little bit, the also I think it's important to remember that the notion of making a commercial somehow being you know, a drag, or like, what a bummer that we have to make commercials. Like, it's
Like the sellout idea.
the
Sure.
sellout idea. Yeah. One thing I've learned, and that I think is true, and this is something I actually, when I was talking to another really great documentary director that's also a professor, I was saying to her at the time, I was like, I'm so jealous that you don't have to make commercials. You get to make documentaries, and then you're a professor, and you get to teach, and then you make documentaries, and that sounds awesome. Because at the time, I was not balancing things well, and I had a pretty negative view on commercials. That has changed largely because of some things that she told me, which was like, well, I'm jealous of you, because in between making your passion films, you're getting to make work. You're on set, you're working with people, you're refining your skills, you're getting to try things out that you might not otherwise get to try out. You have resources. You're working, you're supporting other filmmakers by bringing them onto projects, helping other people get paid. And you're also building some goodwill. Like, when she was saying that sometimes she'll go years without making a film, and when she goes back to making a film, she feels rusty and she feels like she has no favors. And truthfully, I think there's obviously benefits to lots of different career paths, and it's interesting gaining perspective from a different career path that's totally valid and awesome in its own way. But it did give me some appreciation, helped me sort of think about how I wanted to approach commercials. And I've always tried to use it as a learning opportunity. It feels like a paid education in a lot of ways. I've learned so many things about how to interview, or just trying out new techniques, or how to manage situations where you need to sort of construct a scene that you were hoping would feel more authentic, and how can it still feel authentic. Like, these little things that I get to practice and try. So I think the narrative of selling out by making commercials, I get it, and I felt many times that way, but I think there's also a positive way to view it, where it can be a valuable thing to support other filmmakers, including yourself.
And they also happen in about, less than a tenth of the timeline, usually.
Yeah.
Something narrative. I have a feature film that I produced, and we are now submitting to festivals, and we started on that May of last year. And the director started on it several months before I came on board. And, it will at least run through May of next year, but its life will be much longer. Your average commercial you do is 4 to 6 weeks, more or less of your life. They pay about the same. So it's definitely something that's a bit more achievable for you to make a career and a living for yourself doing this. That idea that I was teeing up before you got to that really good point, Charles, was sort of about the there's a couple different avenues, right, where how you can balance the work that you do for fulfillment and the work you do to make money. Our one is the Robin Hood approach, which is we will, take the commercial work we do, and we'll use that to fund the passion projects. It's sort of it's not exactly one for you, one for me, but you use it as a funnel to do this thing. To part of your profits from making commercial work go to funding your passion work. And it's important to make sure that you don't just get fat on the profit of the commercial work, that you do actually use it to fund the passion work, and that you do force yourself to take time to make personal films, because those are the things that will really push your career forward while you're kind of juggling both of these. But that is just one of the avenues to do so. Like Charles has said, you could be full-time somewhere, either teaching in film or working in a job adjacent to the industry, and then on your time off or your weekends, your evening, you're taking on freelance work or making passion work. I know somebody who got a job working as an ad agency producer who wants to be a director, and he did that to learn, okay, what do agencies and clients want, and how can I build connections there? And then on my vacation or on like my weekends or whatever, I'll get together with my friends and I'll make these things, or I'll use my time off to make this stuff, and going to use that to hopefully transition his career. into directing full time, but it's a great way to get experience in it. You can freelance as crew, specialize in something. I forget his name now, but the guy behind The Witch and The Lighthouse was in the art department for years before making those movies. You know, you don't have to always necessarily be pursuing the thing exactly that you want to do if you can be finding a steady work within that world. And then one of the other great things that we've done is, you know, what are other, how can you diversify your streams of revenue, really, for lack of a better word? Do you have gear that you can be renting on sites like KitSplit and lens rentals and whatnot? If you shoot your own stuff, get it up on Film Supply. Film Supply is wonderful. There are a number of great licensing websites up there. That happens to be the licensing site we use. One of our good friends and one of Charles's go-to collaborators, is an incredibly talented cinematographer, but he also realized that, you know, he's a damn good composer also, and he's a pretty good colorist as well. I think having, you know, a couple of different avenues out there with which you can earn a living in the business is really smart and really helpful.
I think it's also worth noting that there can be a tendency, and this actually, you know, well, there can be a tendency to want to sort of be do everything, to be available to and be, you know, oh, I can shoot, I can edit, I can you know, color, I can do sound design, I can do the score, and there is work for that, and there is a valid career path, but it's not it's a very different style of career, I would say. I don't know if there's a better way to describe that.
Yeah, that's a good point. The army of one type thing. There's a lot of work out there where people will be looking for, it often gets like the term like a videographer, of like, hey, I need someone to be able to shoot this thing and, you know, then put it all together and edit it, and that's very valuable for a certain level of work. I think if you getting past that, though, people want to hire a specialist. And you know, when we're looking for crew for things, if someone's website advertises them as a director, but we learn that, oh, well, they actually, you know, it's like, yeah, but I'll also do this other thing. Well, that's not exactly who you want working in that position. You want someone who specializes in that. So it is important to kind of determine what are the things that you're good at doing, that you enjoy doing, carving out a niche for yourself. And then, you know, if you're trying to leverage like a second tent pole of what you can offer to build that up slowly. That's how we started. We started off doing branded documentaries, and then we started to build out more commercial work, to now we do mostly broadcast commercials, and we do documentaries also. But you have to kind of start in one. If we had said like, hey, we're a brand new company in New York, we do everything, nobody was going to hire us that we wanted to work for. Totally. That's a good lesson learned, a good segue there. I know we're running out of time. I will jump through some stuff, but
and if anyone has any questions, Phil, please
yes,
put them in the chat.
Random.
Yeah, I know. Actually, I think we should just keep building off that specialized point, because I think, you know, when we, like Andrew said, when we started at the beginning, it was just me as a director, and I was focused on branded documentaries. And I think in some ways it was helpful that we had a clear focus in the early times, because when people came to us, they had a sense for what we did, and they came to us for a reason. And so there was sort of a higher likelihood that we'd get a job. If it was coming our way, they sort of knew what they were they knew what they were looking for. And so there was a higher likelihood we'd win the job. But over time, we were able to, like Andrew said, slowly grow what our offerings, and because of that, we've been able to expand, and people come to us for a lot of different reasons, which is really nice. But I think getting the start, it's the hardest time to attract work, is when you're right in the beginning. And so being a generalist, saying that you could do it all, it almost makes it harder for people to approach you in some ways, I think. But
yeah, at a certain level, it definitely does. That does come with its own pitfalls of specializing, because it took a couple of years when we started that we wanted to pivot the ship. to getting calls for commercials, for us
And
to
we
actually
still
get
get
them.
that. That
Totally.
still happens.
Yeah, that's yeah, it's hard. Just saw Julia's question come through. Did we go to film school? They're 17. Any advice would be much appreciated. This is a really good one because we are an even split. I did go to film school. I went to Emerson College. I studied ethnographic documentary while I was there. I thought that I was going to go to, like, you know, the rainforest and film people that had never been seen before, and I was going to study different cultures around the world. And obviously I am not doing that. And now I learned during film school that actually not only did I not want to make these documentaries, I didn't even want to direct, period. And had a little bit of crisis of faith before realizing that, oh, what I actually liked was putting the pieces together. It was producing. Film school was very valuable for me. A lot of my network is from people that I went to Emerson with, or I will prioritize hiring people that I saw went through the school. But it's definitely not the only path.
Yeah, so I was gonna go to film school. In high school, I made a lot of films. I was fortunate enough to show some of them at NFFTY, which was huge, incredible experience, eye-opening experience, made me feel more sure than ever that this was the career path I wanted to pursue. And coming out of high school, I had a internship opportunity. So I decided to take a gap year to try out this internship at a production company. But I did not have the most positive experience in that position. And I remember calling up Andrew, we had met years prior, and telling him, and he sort of provided a life raft for me and said, we'll come out to Boston. I'm trying to start this thing up, and let's make some work together. And it was his belief in me at a young age, because I was like 18, that, you know, gave me the confidence to leave that internship and start trying to direct right away. And together, you know, we started working together and found this company together. And my film school was mostly working with Andrew.
Yeah.
Which, you know, again, I think just comes back to that point about surrounding yourself with people, with good people that you enjoy working with, the support, and you can support back. And that's a critical part of this. It's, you know, and there are many times I wish I went to film school. You know, I didn't get the same kind of network that Andrew did. And I think in some ways I missed out on the film school experience. NFFTY provided me with a lot of that feeling, I think, of community. And going to the festival felt like I had like a little glimpse into what I dreamed maybe film school was like. And so that was a beautiful, you know, thing for me. But it did end up working out. Andrew and I kind of going for this, and Andrew being okay with the fact that I was not educated.
I mean, when our first project was my college thesis that Charles was shooting behind the scenes for, and one day after a couple of overnight shoots, and he pulled me aside and, you know, said, like, hey, I want to, you know, show you the films that I make. I'd love to get your thought on it. And I remember the first one that I saw, you know, yeah, it was obvious that like Charles had like done everything for this himself, and then he was 16 years old making it. But it was also obvious to me that there was more inherent talent on display in that film than in anything that myself or my peers, who are all seniors at this expensive film school, were making in the work that we would have, you know, like 20 or 30 person crews to do and raise money for. So there is no monopoly on what you're doing, and there is no your background, your experience, your, you know, privilege, your age. None of that has shit to do with how good of an artist or storyteller you really are. I think that, yeah, we don't at all look at, I mean, I know I will prioritize if I'm torn between two people, someone I went to school with, but I don't think that usually impacts us. I'd say probably half the directors on our roster went to college for what they do. some didn't, and some did not. You know, it's a split, just as much. We got another question in there. Specialize in one skill. What about writer director? Well, you know, there's like anything, there is an exception that proves the rule for it. You know, Charles is a really exceptional director editor. I think that those skills go hand in hand for sure. But if you know, when I see like a film at the end where it says, you know, like written, directed, production design, edited, shot, produced by so and so, I think like, okay, that's probably someone who either didn't have a good team of collaborators to work with. Why did they not want to work with them, etc. I do think the writer director route is one of the most successful for a very good reasons. The same way how in television, the predator, like the producer editor route, is very common. Finding things that are complementary is really great, but getting too many of them and it becomes, you know, not as appealing.
And of course, there is a phase where it's a necessity for, you know, in some circumstances, like in high school, like Andrew was saying, I was doing everything. But I think, you know, my work started to get a lot better when I allowed other people in that could bring their specialty and their perspective, and that friction created work that was a lot more interesting than I could do on my own. So
yeah. I think that's a good, a really good point, and that's that, you know, if as best you can, resist the urge to try and control everything.
Yeah.
You know, the tendency to want to do everything on a project can also come from thinking that, like, well, only I can do this. Like, it has to be exactly as I see it. We started off, Charles, you were talking about this, about advice to your younger self. And I would say that filmmaking is oftentimes a lot about trying to solve problems before they become problems, trying to roll with the punches, things, Murphy's Law, when whatever can happen will happen. And the healthier relationship you can have to the things that are actually within your control and the things that are without, and knowing when it's the right move to advocate for something that's important to you, and knowing when it's the right move to listen to the talented people that you have surrounded yourself with, is very important. You know, if I've had one key defining trait in my success, it's been surrounding myself with people who are more talented and more intelligent or harder working or just better in the various things they do than I would be. And it's always rewarding. We are running out of time. Would love any more questions if they come through. We'll also plug that Charles's debut feature documentary and our first feature as a company is currently available exclusively with the NFFTY Summit for 2 more days. This is a film we're both insanely proud of. It's called Somewhere with No Bridges. And there is a link in the chat. Would encourage you all to watch that. There's my plug.
Yeah, I think it ties into a lot of what we've been talking about too, just because the only reason I feel we were given the space to even make this film was because of the career that we built and spent years kind of building in the commercial space. I think we got to a point where that work was able to support us and give me the freedom to go for a month here, a month there in between doing commercials, to focus on this film and really kind of lose ourselves in it and have that kind of unbelievable luxury of discovering it and allowing it to exist and sit and find it. So I think that, yeah, that's a big point of pride, I think, with the film as well, more than the end result. It's just the process and what we built to get to the point where we could make that happen. So I think it ties into a lot of the lessons and things that we're talking about.
You brought that all together. that was nice.
Yeah.
Well, look at that. It's like 6 o'clock on the money. I didn't see any more questions come in. So wow, this was, look at this. This is professional, coming in on time.
That's another thing. You got to be on time in this industry, right?
You do indeed.
Thank you so much, Charles and Andrew. The film is free, and it's an hour, so you have no excuse not to go watch it immediately following this. Because we ended on time, that means there's more time that you have to go watch Summer with No Bridges. Thank you so much, Charles and Andrew. That was incredible. We have, speaking of things you can watch during the summit, we have one other feature film that's streaming right now called Call Me Intern, and the filmmakers behind that film, which also screened at NFFTY in 2019, are leading a roundtable all about how we can change the culture of unpaid internships, and what do you actually have to do to get your foot in the door in the industry if you're taking a PA position or something like that. So join us tomorrow. That's the last session of the summit. But thank you again so much, Charles and Andrews, for being here. Thank you so much, everybody, for tuning in and your thoughtful questions. Thank you.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you all. Appreciate it.